So, Rui, Catherine, welcome back. While you guys were
Thanks.
gone, I was nominated for an international award. So, congratulations to me.
Oh my gosh, that's huge. Congratulations, Nick. What did we miss? I mean, I know you took over the podcast and talked about beer for an episode.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did that when I wasn't here because I'm celiac.
No, I'm sorry about that. Not only did I talk about beer with my friend Joe, which was great, but I also was nominated for a 67 Pall Mall Global Wine Communicator Award. I don't know if you guys
W-
ever heard of it. It's
Wow.
pretty prestigious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Wait, for your beer episode?
No, just for my podcast, The Four Top.
Uh, Nick,
It's been a long road. There's been many ups and downs, but my work on my podcast, The Four Top, has finally been recognized internationally.
Nick, I founded the Four Top in 2016, and I'm your employer. I mean, I own the trademark. It's literally and legally my podcast.
Which is why when I submitted the paperwork for the awards, I put my name on it. Because at the end of the
Hey,
day, I
Catherine, have
think
you
I
been
end up
following the
doing
news about
most
the
of, you know,
restaurant thefts
I write
in
the
New York
script, I
restaurants?
do research,
Oh
you know,
yeah, thanks
I do
for
all the
changing the
editing,
subject, Ruby.
I
No
reach out to,
problem.
I kind of feel
potential
like one of those New York
advertisers.
restaurant diners right
I
now.
kind of
Like
keep
Nick
both of you
just
guys
rode
in
up on a
mind,
moped and like
honestly, when
stole
it
my
comes to
Rolex right off my wrist,
reporting
except it's
or
my podcast that he stole.
meetings.
Yeah, well, you
You
can
know,
take your revenge like a
I would really
resident of
like to believe
Barcelona.
that
They're
this
so tired
reward
of tourists there that
is
they're spraying
this
them with
award
squirt
is a
guns and
reward
telling
for
them to
my
go
hard
home.
work and keeping this
Okay, this
podcast
is
afloat.
helping. Thank you,
And
Ruby. I am
without me, I think that
visualizing
this probably
just
would have just
spraying
devolved into
Nick
something that you
with a
record
water
for your
gun,
daughters, Catherine,
and that is making me feel better.
and they just listen
But
to like a
seriously, guys, thank you to you both, Ruby and Nick, and to Martin Reyes, Master of Wine, and our guest panelists for all of your hard work in getting the Four Top nominated for a 67 Pall Mall Award. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Swiftonomics comes to the wine world. The Supreme Court creates chaos for alcohol producers. A big tech exec wants to expand access to natural wine and fires force evacuations in Central Coast wine country. These are the 4 wine news stories we're following on episode 162 of your favorite wine news podcast, The Four Top. I'm your host, Catherine Cole, here with Ruby Welkovich and Nick Toole.
So, our first news story supports a theory that I've had for a very long time. Taylor Swift is single handedly keeping the wine industry afloat.
Okay, I've heard a lot of stories about how amazing Taylor Swift is, but this one takes the cake.
But it's true. So, everyone knows that Taylor Swift loves Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, well, as Liz Tosh, Master of Wine, writes in Forbes, recent Nielsen IQ data on US wine sales shows that Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio were the only 2 varietals to show growth in the past 52 weeks.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, well, so as much as I respect Taylor Swift, I saw this article and Tosh points out that Ms. Swift, she refers to Sancerre and Sauvignon Blanc as though they are 2 different things, which, as we wine people know, they aren't. They're kind of the same thing.
Okay, well, I just learned that, and twice as much Sauvignon Blanc is being sold then. Wine labeled as Sauvignon Blanc and wine labeled as Sancerre. Swifties got to have
Oh,
both in their fridges this summer.
Swifty math.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate the Swifty math. I am reading that TikTok is overrun by videos of Swifties trying Sancerre because Taylor name dropped it once. So, all right.
I mean, I do respect this woman's power. Didn't we report on this earlier, Ruby? Something about Taylor drinking Gaslighter Rosé, and it was something about a breakup, song lyrics, episode 131.
Yes, the Joe Alwyn breakup. Please keep up, Catherine.
Right. You know what, Nick? I think I know what's going on here. Ruby just saw Taylor Swift perform in Amsterdam and is completely under her spell. Understandable girl crush situation here. I don't know that Taylor Swift is actually changing the wine industry, but Ruby, I think what we need is a moment here for you to describe your experience seeing Taylor Swift live in Amsterdam.
Wow, thank you. I thought you would never ask. The concert was amazing. I don't know if you know this, but everybody dresses up, or a lot of people dress up in different eras of her tour. So I dressed up as the Tortured Poets Department era, which is her newest album. covered myself in fake tattoos and wore this black outfit with lots of bows, but that's not really important to the concert. Obviously, it was really magical. I do have to say, if you are going to a Taylor Swift concert somewhere in Europe, Dutch people are really tall.
Oh, yeah.
And
They're
Uh,
very tall.
I was standing and therefore could not see the stage because there were lots of tall people in front of me. But it was magical.
well, I hate to burst your bubble, but unfortunately, this Forbes article does say that it is not possible to scientifically prove that Taylor Swift is impacting wine sales trends.
Well, I will continue to believe it's true.
And I'm sure everyone who's selling Sauvignon Blanc and Sancerre and or because it's the same thing, is happy about this. And I would like to tip my hat to author Liz Tosh, MW, for writing about a topic she knew that we would talk about on the Forzab.
So, last week we learned that GSM stands for Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre, or something along those lines. And not, grape S&M. I think we were all pretty confused.
I think you were confused. We were not.
Okay, anyway,
Rosé, Méditerranée, IGP.
does not necessarily conform to the regular old grapes that you find in, say, Provence. We've got variety here, folks.
Yeah, and it's not like this is a new wine growing region. This is an ancient wine growing region. The Greeks introduced viticulture and enology here as far back as 600 BC. And I could really go on about the long ancient history of rosé in this region. I mean, once they discovered that vines could be hermaphroditic, really some of the earliest grape varieties had pink skins. And if
All
you
right, Nick, we've got to cut her off.
Yeah, okay, I'm on it.
and if you think back, I mean, the Roman vina medium.
Back to business. Overall, in Indication géographique protégée Méditerranée, you will find white, red, and rosé wines, but the vast majority, a full 75%, are rosé. These rosés range from more delicate, light, and refreshing to fuller, more robust pink wines with cherry, strawberry, and spice notes. We've got beach rosés and Bouffe Bourguignon rosés.
I love this region because when we think about, say, Provençal rosés, we think about a pretty specific style and a limited number of grapes. But winemakers in the wider
Méditerranée IGP.
region have a lot more leeway for creativity than those in other French wine regions, and it shows in really wonderful ways. In our next sponsor break, we will tell you all about that creativity, but for now, thank you to
Rosé Méditerranée IGP.
for your support. So guys, who wants to talk about regulation?
Hell yeah.
Wow, I have been waiting for a story about regulation.
I know, so much fun, so much fun. So, Ruby, while we were away, the Supreme Court handed down a lot of interesting decisions. Of course, they did it leading up to the 4th of July holiday, so no one would notice what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a few of those decisions were huge news, but a few flew under the radar, and one such decision could have an enormous impact on the alcohol industry.
That's right. On June 28th, the Supreme Court struck down a 40-year-old precedent known as the Chevron deference.
Right. And it was actually named after a lawsuit filed by the Chevron Energy Company against the Natural Resources Defense Council back in the 1980s. Chevron did not like the way the NRDC and the EPA were interpreting the Clean Air Act. You can probably guess where Chevron came down on the whole subject of air pollution.
Right. The precedent that arose out of this case basically stipulated that whenever there is ambiguity about regulations, the court is compelled to defer to the appropriate federal agency's interpretation of that ambiguity. The idea is that Congress gives federal agencies like the EPA, or more relevant to wine, the TTB, the authority to interpret laws, and the court should defer to this interpretation when deciding a case.
The Supreme Court, however, just struck down the Chevron deference. So, Ruby, you mentioned the TTB, and many of us are wondering how this will affect the alcohol industry.
Yeah, we just don't even know yet. And just to wrap my head around this, I turned to a recent piece in Wine Searcher from W. Blake Gray. He always does such a great job with these really complex topics. And he writes that it will now be entirely up to the courts to interpret ambiguity in regulatory law in alcohol. And this could be, folks, I think the technical term is an absolute shit show.
Yeah, right. I see where you are going. Different courts and different judges could come to different decisions state by state.
You already see this happen a lot with EPA regulations. Anyone looking to sue over a regulation can shop around for a sympathetic judge, and it just gets all wacky.
And then consider that federal agencies often take public comments when considering how to go about regulating industry. It's very methodical. They have the staff to process and consider these comments. And they also employ subject matter experts in whatever industry they're in charge of. So they take in all this input and expertise, and this is all lost when the decision is in the hands of one judge.
Yeah, it seems like the power is getting a little bit consolidated here.
Then we need to think about all of the alcohol industry rules that have been decided based on the TTB's interpretation of a law. Rules around labeling wines as, quote, healthy or clean, or let's say rules around payment terms.
This sounds like a nightmare for producers. If a rule can change based on which judge it lands in front of, how are wineries or breweries expected to keep up?
Yeah, this is going to be a nail biter. I mean, regulations are already so labyrinthine from state to state. I can only imagine the disparities will get worse, you guys. We just have to wait and see how this pans out.
It's going to be a payday for corporate lawyers out there.
Cha-ching! So, over the last week, we've been following, via the LA Times, the path of the lake fire in Santa Barbara, which continues to burn. Of course, the fire is concerning to so many people for so many reasons, but as a wine podcast, we're looking at its potential impact on wineries and the Santa Ynez Valley AVA.
Yeah, last week we were not sure how some of these wineries could fare given that evacuation orders were issued for areas very near vineyards, and several wineries had to close because of the fire cutting off access to roads leading to them.
Well, we have good ish news. According to Hannah Wiley of the LA Times, it looks like the threat to wine country in the area has lessened and the fire is moving north away from the vineyards. That said, the fire has grown and is, as of this recording, nearly 38,000 acres large. As of Monday, it was 34% contained.
Yeah, so we are relieved to hear our friends in the Santa Ynez Valley are able to just take a little breather, at least for now. But the fire is still impacting so many people, and we are thankful to those fighting to stop it.
And there are wildfires burning throughout the western United States right now, so we need to stay vigilant. For those looking for wildfire updates, we recommend visiting inciweb.wildfire.gov.
So we left off last time talking about the freedom and the creativity of
Rosé Méditerranée IGP.
winemakers, and it really is so wonderful. Many of these wines are blends, and this allows winegrowers to express themselves using a variety of grapes and methods.
Yeah, they aren't inhibited by the strict rules of the smaller appellations, which, regulate production techniques, vineyard locations and yields, and permitted varieties.
I'm envisioning a multicolored painter's palette and wines that are like the Venice equivalent of Monet paintings. And I like what I see.
It doesn't hurt, too, that they all have that racy influence of the Mistral, the famous northwesterly wind in the south of France.
Yeah, this wind makes for thicker skins on the grapes, building in tannins and flavor. It also ensures acidity. Plus, many of these vineyard sites are subalpine, and so there's elevation at play too in many cases, with that effect of bright sunshine and cool morning and evening temperatures.
Some of the tasting notes that mark the region are cherry, strawberry, and spice. Yum.
Plus, there's that trademark wild herb array that can be found throughout the region. It's called garrigue. This is like what's known in the western United States as chaparral.
The French also called the denser shrubs maquis. Interesting side note, in World War II, they actually used to call members of the resistance the maquis because they would hide in the bush out in the remote hillsides.
But these are like laurel, juniper, and myrtle bushes, right? These spiders must have smelled like weirdly really good, kind of a nice evergreen scent.
Yeah, like the one good thing that happened in World War II was the resistant spiders smelled good. And garrigue, which includes wild lavender, thyme, sage, and verbena, it also smells so amazing. When you buy Herbe de Provence, it's kind of that smell, and you can really pick up these aromatics in these wines.
Oh my gosh, you guys, I am imagining a picnic on plein air, and I am getting thirsty and hungry.
And I am feeling the joie de vivre of the south of France. Thank you,
Rosé Méditerranée IGP.
for inspiring and supporting the foretop.
And thank you, Nick, for not singing about your joie de vivre.
Joie de vivre.
All right, guys, for our final news story, I'm really excited to talk about something I've known about for a few months because I worked on it. I worked on the websites for it, actually. And now I can finally talk about it since both Wine Spectator and the San Francisco Chronicle have covered it.
Okay, way to bury the lead, Catherine. What's the story?
So, the story is that a former Google executive named David Drummond purchased two Sonoma wineries, Armida and Idlewild. And he has also been acquiring vineyard land and is rolling out two new wine brands, Overshine and Comunita. And there may be additional wine brands down the road as part of this empire he's building.
All right, so another rich tech guy is building a wine empire. Why is this news?
Well, I will tell you, but before I go further, I just want to say again, I did work on the websites for both Overshine and Comunita. I've met David Drummond in one video call, so I'm not an objective party in this conversation. But I do think that what's happening here is newsworthy enough and just different enough that it's worth taking notice.
So, what makes it different?
So I am just so used to reading stories, and I'm sure you are too, guys, about people who have found success in business and they start up this big wine company or a big fancy winery. And usually it's built around Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, or maybe it's Oregon Pinot Noir, or maybe sometimes it's Central Coast Rhone varieties. But here we have a business executive rolling out a new brand, Comunita, and it's based entirely on obscure Italian and French grape varieties, like, Rouchet and Gamay and
Ooh, Catherine, I am getting chillable red wine vibes.
yeah.
Like Brooklyn Cool Kid Wine Bar vibes.
I am so opening a wine bar called Brooklyn Cool Kid Wine Bar.
Not TM, sorry, you can't. I just TM'd you.
TM, TM.
Right, so this is like a totally different target demographic than the usual big fancy new winery announcement, right? He's mostly replanted his 550-acre Russian River Valley vineyard called Las Cimas to dozens of these lesser-known grape varieties. He's partnered with a winemaker, Sam Bilbro, who is staunchly committed to organic and regenerative farming and traditional low-intervention winemaking. So this just looks different to me.
And I'm reading here that Drummond was once among the tech industry's highest ranking black executives, and now he is motivated by a mission to make wine feel more welcoming to people who might feel intimidated by it, especially people of color like himself. So, all right, yeah, I guess someone with Drummond's success, we would expect to just roll out a Napa Cabernet Sauvignon, but he hasn't done that. And his former employer, Google, is ahead of the curve usually. So, does this mean that this is where the industry is going?
I mean, if it means lower alcohol wines and offbeat Italian and French grape varieties become more available and more people feel welcome in the wine industry, I'm all for it. Listeners, we love your input. Each week we post our question of the week and we want you to weigh in. Now, our latest question of the week only went up a mere 2 hours ago, so we aren't rolling in responses yet, but we do have two folks who weighed in. The question was, what is your favorite wine to drink al fresco? So what have we heard, guys?
Alrighty, so our Instagram friend Ritzy Ruiz does not discriminate and simply says wine with a smiley face sunglasses emoji. So just wine. Why complicate things?
And user Allison Luvera is a little biased because she co-founded a wine brand called Juliet. So of course she says, drink Juliet Sauvignon Blanc, which I'm sure Taylor Swift would also like. But she also recommends any Rueda Verdejo. And she includes the fun champagne glasses emoji, which is my favorite emoji.
Well, as a packaging nerd, I can say that Juliet Wine has some really cool packaging. But since we don't have too many responses yet, let's just do a quick lightning round and answer ourselves. If I'm drinking al fresco, I'm going to go with a chilled red wine.
Ooh, so predictable. I have been exploring. I've been exploring Italian wines recently, so I'm gonna go with a nice, fresh, lively herbal Vermentino.
That sounds good. But, guys, given that this episode was sponsored by IGP Rosé Méditerranée, I am going to cover my ass and say a beautiful rosé from southern France. But you know what?
Mm.
That actually does sound good. So,
That does sound good.
all right, guys. Well, it's time for this week's dessert course. And my dessert, it's going to sound like me patting myself on the back, but actually, it is a thank you. Patting myself on the back because I am referencing my column in the current issue of Decanter magazine online. And for this column, which commemorated the 100th anniversary of Rudolf Steiner's lectures on agriculture, which basically led to biodynamic agriculture, I quoted 3 very talented women who are also, I think, really brave for speaking up. So I want to thank Lauren Johnson Wuncher, who's a wine writer, Kenzie Bindrup, who works for the Winery Lane Collective in Oregon, and also the wonderful, talented winemaker Claire Giroux. She makes just beautiful Rieslings, bubblies, and Pinot Noir at Brooks Winery here in Oregon. And so they were all willing to discuss with me the really uncomfortable fact that they either practice or very much believe in the power of biodynamic viticulture, but we talked about the fact that Rudolf Steiner, who founded biodynamics, also wrote a lot of stuff that's just weird. And among his writings are some really repugnant statements about people of different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. I mean, let's just face it, he was an Austrian writing right after World War I, and he was a racist. So it's hard to square that. It's hard to talk about that. So I just wanted to thank those folks for talking with me, and please read the article and let me know what you think. Let's keep this conversation going. And with that, this has been the Four Top Podcast, and no, this is not Nick's podcast. I am our executive producer, Catherine Cole.
And I am our presumptive executive producer, Nick Jewell.
And I'm media and design manager, Ruby Walkovich.
Keelan King is the composer and performer of our theme music, which I still believe should be the song of summer. Please visit our website, thefourtop.org, to learn more about us and listen to back episodes.
And if you have not already subscribed to The Four Top on iTunes or Spotify, please do so, and please leave us a rating.
This is important. Every rating feeds that crazy algorithm and helps new listeners find The Four Top.
Well, with a glass of rosé in my hand, because it is summer, I wish I was al fresco, but I'm not. But this is Catherine signing out.
From the sticky shores of Maine, where I am relishing in my newfound status as a finalist for an award, this is Nick signing out.
And I may be in Brooklyn, New York, but my heart and sleep schedule are still in Paris. This is Ruby signing out. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.